The number on the screen says 412,000, and nobody in the room even blinks. It's a renewal contract, a client account. Someone from finance reads it out loud like it's nothing, and the meeting keeps moving because that's what these meetings do. They keep moving whether you're paying attention or not. You've sat in this exact conference room 340 times, maybe more, same laminate table, same guy adjusting the thermostat every 15 minutes because he runs cold, same slide deck font that nobody bothered to change since 2019. But this time, for reasons you can't fully explain, that number does something. 412,000. Your brain grabs it and runs somewhere it shouldn't during a Tuesday budget review, straight to your own accounts, straight to a spreadsheet you update every first Sunday of the month. Alone. Coffee going cold. The house quiet. And for the first time in 12 years of doing this, you do the math, sitting right there in that chair. Not the careful version, the rough one, the one that takes 4 seconds. And the number that comes back scares you a little, because it's bigger than you thought. Here's what nobody tells you about wealth built slowly: it doesn't announce itself. There's no bell, no milestone email. You cross lines you can't see, and you keep showing up to conference rooms like this one, still eating the same turkey sandwich, still driving the same car with 131,000 miles on it, completely unaware that the ground under you has shifted. You are 41 years old. Your name is Polly. And for the last 12 years, while most people were upgrading their lives, you were quietly doing something else entirely. Rewind to 29. You're renting a one-bedroom for $1,500 a month, driving a used Accord you bought for $11,000 cash, and your coworker Kevin just leased a truck that costs $740 a month before insurance. Kevin looks successful. Kevin has the watch, the truck, the golf membership he mentions constantly. You have a Roth IRA. You max out every January 1st before you can talk yourself out of it, and a high yield savings account paying 4.6% that most people don't even know exists. Nobody claps for that. Nobody notices a 29-year-old skipping the truck. Your mother asked you once, gently, if you were doing okay, because you still drove the Accord at 33, because you packed lunch instead of ordering out, because you didn't post vacations. You said you were fine. You were more than fine. You just weren't performing wealth. You were building it in the part of your life nobody was watching. That's the part people misunderstand about this. It isn't sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice. It's a bet. A quiet, boring, unglamorous bet that if you stayed consistent long enough, the math would eventually do something you couldn't do on willpower alone. By 35, your portfolio crossed 200,000 for the first time, and it felt like nothing. No fireworks, just a number in an app you checked before bed. By 38, it was 410,000, mostly index funds, mostly left alone, riding an average return somewhere around 10.5% a year, because you refused to touch it during the 2 times it dropped hard enough to make your stomach turn. There was someone else who noticed, though, quietly, the way people on the same path tend to notice each other. Priya, 2 cubicles over, started around the same time you did. She drove a 9-year-old Corolla and never once complained about it. One Friday in the break room, back when you were 31, she asked what your interest rate was on the mortgage. Out of nowhere, like it was normal small talk. You told her. She nodded and said, "Good. Don't touch the principal early. Put anything extra into the market. Instead, the math almost always favors it above 7% returns." You didn't fully understand why at the time. You went home and read about it for 3 hours instead of watching television. That was the night the spreadsheet ritual actually started. Priya never talked about money loudly. She just quietly retired at 42, 4 years ago now, moved 2 states over, and sends a card at Christmas with a photograph of a garden that gets bigger every year. You think about her more than you'd admit. Kevin, meanwhile, was still leasing, still upgrading, still telling you at lunch about the new boat. He was thinking about, Financed the way everything in Kevin's life was financed a payment, stacked on a payment. 22% interest, quietly eating him alive on 2 credit cards he didn't mention. You just kept your Sunday spreadsheet ritual going. There was also the debt nobody saw. $34,000 in student loans at 26, the number that used to make your chest tighten every time a statement showed up. You didn't talk about that either. You threw every extra $100 at it for 5 straight years, ate a lot of rice and beans you'd never admit to now, and watched it disappear by 31. Not fast, not impressive, just gone. One payment at a time, while people around you leased cars against income that was already spoken for twice over. Then, 2022 happened, and for 6 months, the whole bet looked like it might have been wrong. And somewhere in there, you're not even sure which month exactly your mortgage balance and your investment balance crossed each other on the chart. The debt going down, the assets going up 2 lines meeting in the middle like they'd been running toward each other the whole time. Your 410,000 dropped to 328,000 in about 5 months. $82,000 gone on paper, while inflation made everything else more expensive at the same time. You checked the app more than you're proud of. You lay awake once doing the math on what happens if it never comes back, and there's no version of that math that feels good at 2 in the morning. Elena asked if you should move some of it to something safer. You almost said yes. You'd read enough to know that selling into a drop locks in the loss forever, that the recovery only belongs to the people who stay in the market. Through the ugly part, but knowing something and feeling calm about it at 2 in the morning are 2 very different things. You didn't move it. You kept contributing the same amount every paycheck, buying more shares at lower prices without feeling a single ounce of good about it in the moment. By the middle of 2023, it had recovered past where it started. By 2024, it kept going. The 82,000 you watched disappear came back and brought more with it. And the only thing that made the difference between you and someone who lost money for real was that you didn't touch it. Here's the part that's hard to admit. There were nights you almost stopped. 36 was rough. Elena was pregnant. The car needed a transmission you didn't see coming. $1,800 you genuinely didn't want to spend. And for about 6 weeks, you seriously considered pausing the retirement contributions just to breathe easier. You didn't. You cut the streaming subscriptions instead, renegotiated the phone plan, found $93 a month hiding in places you weren't looking. It felt small. It didn't feel like it mattered. It mattered. Fast forward to right now. This Tuesday, this conference room, this meeting about a renewal contract that has nothing to do with you personally except that it triggered something you hadn't let yourself calculate in this much detail before. Your number, the real one, the one sitting across your brokerage account, your 401k, your Roth, and the emergency fund earning 4.7% that you built up to $38,000 over 6 patient years is $1,426,000. Say that slowly. 1.426 million. Not a typo, not a rounding error. The real number, sitting there in black and white in an account you check on your phone in a parking lot most mornings without really seeing it. You didn't inherit it. Nobody gave it to you. You built it in 12 years on a salary that peaked at $118,000 in a house that cost you $390,000, back when rates were still reasonable. Refinanced once at 6.9% paid down aggressively. Every year, you got a bonus instead of buying something to celebrate the bonus. And here's where the meeting stops being background noise. Here's where your hands actually go still on the table. If you take 4% of 1.426 million, the number planners use the number that's supposed to survive 30 years of withdrawals without running dry. That's $57,040 a year. Passive, untouched by anything you do at a desk. Your actual monthly expenses, the real ones, mortgage included. Groceries for a family of 3 running close to $1,000 a month everything. Land around $4,190. $50,000 a year covers that. With room left over, you are not rich in the way Kevin performs rich. You don't have the truck. You don't have the boat. But sitting in this conference room, watching someone drone on about a renewal, you realize something that takes your breath sideways for a second. You don't have to be here. Not forever. Not even necessarily tomorrow. But the option, the actual mathematically real option, exists now in a way it didn't exist 6 months ago or 2 years ago or at any single point before this exact Tuesday. That's the part almost nobody talks about. The moment isn't loud. Nobody stands up in a meeting and quits on the spot, the way it happens in movies. It's quieter than that. It's you sitting perfectly still, doing arithmetic in your head while a man named Gary explains a renewal timeline and realizing the walls of your life just moved without anyone touching them. You don't say anything in the meeting. Of course you don't. You nod at the right moments. You even ask a mildly useful question about the renewal terms on autopilot, while another part of your brain is somewhere else entirely standing at the edge of a door that's apparently been unlocked this whole time. Gary keeps talking. Someone brings up next quarter's targets. You catch yourself running the math a second time, slower now, checking your own work the way you'd check a client's numbers, because a feeling this big deserves a second look before you trust it. 4% of 1.426 million. 57,040. You do it again in your head, differently, using 3% instead. The more conservative number some planners prefer, and it still comes out to almost 43,000 a year, still more than half your expenses covered by money that never has to ask you for anything ever again. Even the cautious version of the math holds. That night, you tell Elena, not dramatically. You're doing dishes, she's helping your daughter with homework at the counter, and you just say it plainly. I ran the numbers today. We could actually do this. Not right now, but we could. She stops for a second, puts the pencil down, and she doesn't ask what you mean because 12 years of Sunday spreadsheets have made her fluent in exactly what you mean. How long have you known? She asks. About 4 hours, you say. She almost laughs. Then she doesn't, because it isn't really funny, it's something closer to relief, arriving 12 years late, quietly, on a Tuesday, over dishes. Here's what changes in the weeks after, and it isn't what you'd expect. You don't quit. You don't send a dramatic resignation letter. What changes is smaller and stranger than that. You stop saying yes to the projects that used to eat your weekends. You say no to a Saturday call for the first time in 3 years, and nothing bad happens. The building doesn't fall down. Gary handles it fine. You start noticing how much of your old urgency was fear dressed up as ambition. Fear of falling behind, fear of the mortgage, fear of not having enough, running quietly underneath every extra hour you ever gave this job. That fear is mostly gone now, replaced by something calmer. Not laziness, just choice. The difference between running because something's chasing you and running because you want to. You start walking in the mornings before work, something you'd told yourself for 6 years you didn't have time for. Turns out you had exactly 40 minutes of time the entire way through. You just spent it scrolling a phone in a parking garage, killing the gap between arriving and needing to look busy. 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week, for the rest of a career you're no longer afraid of losing. You call your mother and tell her, finally, the actual number. Not the vague, we're doing okay you'd given her for a decade. The real one. She's quiet for a second, then asks if that means you're going to buy a bigger house. You tell her no. You're going to buy more Fridays instead. She doesn't fully get it, but she says she's proud of you twice in the same phone call, which she's never done before, not even once. Kevin notices something's different about you before he can name it. He asks if you got a raise. You almost laugh because the honest answer is more complicated than that. You got 12 years, not a raise. You got 4.6% HYSA rates compounding quietly while he financed a boat at 9%. You got the version of wealth that doesn't show up in a driveway. You don't explain any of that to Kevin. You just say something like that and let him think what he wants. 2 months later, he mentions, quieter than usual, that he's selling the boat. Doesn't say why. You don't ask. Some lessons only land when they're ready to. And yours took 12 years of Sundays to arrive. 6 weeks after that Tuesday, you sit down and actually write out what coast looks like for your family. Not full retirement, not yet. Your daughter's college fund still needs feeding, but a version where you drop to 4 days a week, take the pay cut, and let the portfolio keep compounding on its own while you get 8 extra hours back every single week for the rest of your life. 52 Saturdays that used to belong partly to Gary now belong entirely to you. Your manager, when you bring it up, doesn't fight it the way you expected. You'd rehearsed the conversation for a week, half convinced she'd tell you it wasn't possible, that the role didn't work at 4 days. Instead, she leans back and asks how long you've been thinking about it. About 12 years, you almost say, but you keep it simpler. You tell her a few months. She asks what day you'd drop. You say Fridays. She says she'll need to move one recurring meeting, and that's basically it. The whole negotiation takes 11 minutes. You'd built it up into a wall in your head, and it turned out to be a doorway the whole time. Companies would rather keep 80% of someone good than lose 100% of them chasing burnout. You didn't know that going in. You know it now. The pay cut is real. About $11,000 a year, and a version of you from a decade ago would have flinched hard at that number. This version of you runs it against the 57,000 sitting quietly in the portfolio, doing nothing, needing nothing, and the 11,000 barely registers. There's a version of this story where you quit everything at 41 and disappear to some coast somewhere, and maybe that's someone's story, but it isn't quite yours. Not yet. Yours is quieter. Yours is a Friday that used to belong to a conference room, now belonging to your daughter's soccer game every single week, without the low hum of guilt that used to sit under everything. The truck Kevin financed will be paid off in 4 more years, assuming nothing goes wrong, and it usually does. Your portfolio, left alone, doing what index funds have done for 100 years running, will likely cross 2 million before your daughter finishes high school, without you adding another dollar past your normal contributions. You didn't do anything heroic to get here. That's honestly the strangest part, looking back. There was no single genius move, no lucky stock pick, no inheritance, no windfall. There was a Roth IRA funded on January 1st for 12 straight years. There was a high yield account instead of a checking account holding money that used to just sit there earning nothing. There was an Accord you kept 6 years past when you could have upgraded it, and a refinance at 6.9 that saved you $310 a month you funneled straight back into the market instead of a bigger house. None of it looked like anything, month to month. That's exactly why it worked. Nobody notices compounding while it's happening. You only notice it the day a stranger in a meeting says a number out loud, and your brain, without permission, runs the same math on your own life for the first time in years. You still go to work most days. The version of you sitting in that conference room 341 times, 342, still shows up, still nods at the right moments, still eats the turkey sandwich. But something underneath it has changed permanently, and it isn't the number itself. It's what the number bought you that has nothing to do with money at all. It bought you a door. You don't have to walk through it today. Some days you won't want to. But it's there now, unlocked. In a way, it wasn't 12 Januaries ago, when a 29-year-old in a one-bedroom apartment decided for no applause and no audience, that boring and consistent beats impressive, and broke. Nobody was watching then. Somebody's watching now. And the strange part is, it's you. Your daughter is 9, and on the first Friday you're actually home, she asks why you're not at work like usual. You almost give her the complicated version. Instead, you just say, I get this day now, every week. She doesn't fully understand what that means. And that's fine. You didn't fully understand it either. At 29, funding a Roth IRA, nobody asked you to fund. Driving a car nobody was impressed by. That evening, you open the spreadsheet with her sitting next to you more out of habit than any grand teaching moment, and she asks what all the numbers mean. You tell her the short version. That money you don't spend today can quietly turn into more money later if you leave it alone long enough and don't panic when it drops. She asks how long enough is. You tell her the truth, longer than feels fair, and shorter than you'd think once you're actually doing it. She won't remember this exact Friday. Kids rarely remember the specific moments that shaped them, but somewhere in the pattern of Fridays that follow, you home, present, not checking a work phone every 11 minutes, something is being deposited in her the same way something got deposited in that brokerage account back when nobody was watching. Compounding doesn't only happen in index funds, it happens in the quiet, repeated things nobody claps for until one day, a long time from now, she'll do her own version of the math in a room that has nothing to do with you, and something will shift for her too, the same way it shifted for you on an ordinary Tuesday over a number someone else read out loud without knowing what it would cost the rest of the meeting.